Oh, hi everybody. Yeah, I had a couple of readings yesterday, developing my mediumship, um, and being of service to people and to the spirit world. And I was going to spend today just making a few notes about what I've learned and how my mediumship is developing and what I'm learning from the practice. But I thought, why not record it instead and share it with everybody? So here we go. Um, So I'm happy to say all the readings went really well, and there was a lot of healing and a lot of tears. And one of the things I've noticed is that when I connect with people's loved ones who come in from the spirit world, and there's a lot of emotion in the room, I tend to feel that emotion too. I guess I feel it from the sitter and the person who's coming from the reading, and I feel it oftentimes from the spirit of the person who's coming in. Um, so, you know, I'm comfortable with that. I don't mind crying. I cry all the time. Um, but it is tiring too. So what I've learned, or I'm beginning to learn, is, it's okay to feel into the space emotionally, but also not to take it on personally. This isn't my grief necessarily. And even to ask the loved one who may have come in to just step back a little bit. You know, I was at a great master class in the Arthur Findlay College recently on Zoom. Um, and one of the mediums, Val Williams, I think her name was, she gave her one golden tip to developing mediums, and that is, when we're working with spirit, we ask our guide to come in behind us, it's almost like to energetically give us a hug and connect with us so that we can hear and feel and sense the information that our guide is giving us. And then, but also to remember, then the guide will step out of our connector and to allow the loved one in spirit, to come into that space, to step into that space, so that I'm receiving the information and the impressions from them in the same way, and the guide is facilitating that for me. So that was really good. It was good to remember that, and I used it a few times in my readings. And it really, and this is a point that I come back to, like, in order for a good session to happen, I have to be in a good place and connecting well. To the person in the spirit world who's coming in has to be in a good place, and the sitter has to be in a good place. So like there was one reading where the woman hadn't really grieved the loss of her partner, and so there's a lot of grief in the space, and I would say somewhat blocking the energy. And then her partner didn't believe in the afterlife, so I guess it was an adjustment for him. So to bring him in and then to give that information to the sitter, that was quite a challenging reading. It didn't flow as well as it could. But I still brought him in, and I gave a certain amount of evidence, which was great, but it didn't flow as well as it could. And I think, again, it's that triangle of connection that's really important. Whereas for another woman, her husband came in really strongly, and there was a great connection there. He was very easy to connect with. And I noticed the information I was given, I was able to say that he was a musician. He was singing Elvis songs for her, his favorite songs. And again, it depends on the medium. So for me, what I recognize is my inner freedom is really important too, so that I'm not just up in my head giving information, but I'm actually making the reading come alive for the person. So when I brought in the man who was a musician, her husband, I had enough inner freedom to sing the Elvis song for her, like to sit not to be, even though I'm not a singer, it doesn't matter. But it brought an extra energy into not only the connection for me with the person, but also for the sitter too. It brought even more energy into the reading. So not only did I sing the Elvis song a little bit for her, but then he wanted to, and he wanted to dance with her. So I asked her permission, because consent is important always in readings. I said, look, he wants to dance with you, and we were dancing together, and apparently that was their thing. They used to jive together all the time. So she couldn't believe it. Here she was jiving with her husband who had died, who had passed over. And again, you know, I could have just sat in the chair and said to her, well, your husband liked to dance with you, full stop. You know, and okay, that's good evidence, but where's the energy in that? There isn't really that much. But to all of a sudden, and I suppose again that comes back to me as the medium. I noticed that not only, you know, is it important that I have the inner freedom and I'm not too self-conscious about what I do. To be honest, at this point in my development, I'm not. But it's a little bit almost, it's a little bit trancey. It's a little bit of what's called light trance. So, you know, I also work as a trance medium, and I'm developed as a trance medium at different levels. So light trance is, you know, not only am I connecting to her husband as he comes in mentally and picking up his vibrations and his impressions and his thoughts and his feelings and giving that information to the sitter, but then I can encourage him to come in a little bit more. I can encourage him to come in a little bit more and let him, that's the key. I let him move my body and dance with his wife the way he used to when he was alive. Now that takes the session and the reading to a whole other level of experience, doesn't it? You know, you're not just, again, we've gone beyond now the mental delivery of information or the emotional exchange in the reading, and into a real physicality in the message. And for me, I love that. I come alive in that. You know, I feel, yes, this is, you know, I mean, I don't know how to jive, but this guy was jiving away with his wife. And it was just for about 20 seconds, 30 seconds. But for her, it was like, oh my God. I mean, you know, you can't get better evidence than that. You just can't, you know. And again, you know, he was sitting there in my clairvoyance. I could see him sitting on the sofa beside her. He put his arm around her, and, you know, and this is what he used to do all the time, you know. So again, she could feel him there, and I was, I suppose, backing that up with her, and you know, he had a favorite song that he used to sing for her, and I was able to tell her that. So that's all really good evidence and good information. So again, I think the learning for me as I developed yesterday, particularly in my readings, was how to handle the sometimes heavy grief that comes into the room. I am an empathic person and a feeling person, so I feel it. I feel everything that's in the room, and I don't mind crying because I feel, I can feel with the person. That's what empathy actually means, to feel with another person, but not to personalize it, not to take it on myself. So I'm not tired afterwards, and I don't feel stretched. And if I do feel it's very strong, to just, again, you know, sometimes I'll say it. I say there's a lot of grief in the room. So that helps to name it, to bring it from this kind of diffuse emotional energy into consciousness. Yeah, there's a lot of grief in the room. Do you feel it? And say it to the person, the sitter themselves. And also to ask their loved one to step back a little bit out of my heart space, you know, come more in on a mental level. And a physical level, because I love the physical level. I think that's a new development for me, the physicality, to really kind of let the person come in and get a really good, strong feeling in my body. How does my body change with them? How does my personality start to change? So I'm not only getting impressions from their mentally and emotionally, but the physical, real physical personalities coming through. And I just love that. I really do. So Again, I had another reading later on in the day. If you're still watching at this point, well done. But I had another reading later on, very later on in the day. And, this woman's husband died suddenly in an accident. And the first time she came to me, I just could not bring him in. I couldn't bring him in. And I asked Spirit afterwards, I said, why couldn't I bring him? I didn't charge the person, of course. That's good ethics. But, I asked Spirit, I said, why can I not bring him in? And the reply was, well, he's just not ready yet. He's just not ready yet. And I guess, as I develop, I'm learning all about what happens to people after we die physically. I'm learning all about that. And it seems that sometimes when people die, they don't even know they're dead. Sometimes there's just a lot of shock, and it takes time for the person to adjust. Not just the spirit of the person, but obviously the sitter too. I think she had a lot of shock still around what happened. It was only like 2 or 3 months. And and maybe, because I come in on such a visceral, such an emotional connection, again, maybe it's just I'm not able to move past that energy so well. But she came back to me last night, which was wonderful. She came back to me again and last night, and this time I was able to connect with him, and I noticed how it's almost like fishing sometimes. It's almost like fishing, because I'm not in control as the medium about who comes in. I can't control that. Like, my guide facilitated, and obviously lots of people are invited in the spirit world to come and talk to the sitter, but if someone says, well, I just want to talk to my husband, I can't do that necessarily. I'll try, but it's outside of my control, So what I noticed I was doing was, it was almost like fishing. I was kind of fishing, fishing for the husband, and kind of reeling in. Is he out there somewhere? Come in, come in, come in. And, I was doing that last night. And then I'd pick up a little bit of information from him. I'd pick up something. Like, I started to move my shoulders and twitch a bit. And I'm like, what's going on here? And all of a sudden, the wife said, well, he had ADHD. And I said, I have him, And so once we had that tiny little connection, I was able to then work on bringing him more and more into the room, bring him into my slot and say, come on in, give me your impressions, connect with my energy. Let's give your wife some information here about you. And it's great, because that was a real learning for me. It's just, not to expect the person to just come straight in and just give you everything straight away. That doesn't always happen. Now, sometimes it does, which is great. There's some very strong people in spirit, but not always. So when he came in, I just got a little bit of information. Physically, she confirmed that it was AIDS, and then straight away he told me he had been on medication, and that helped him to manage it, so it wasn't really a problem. And I said that to his wife, and all of a sudden we're off, and then the information starts to come more and more and more. And I noticed then that what tends to happen is, when somebody comes in like that, and we make a connection and the information starts to flow, all of a sudden my vision's it's like the curtains are drawn back a bit more, and other people that are connected to him and to the sitter start to come in. So I could see then that he was with his mother in the spirit. At one point, his father came in the spirit. He showed me that his brother, who had died at childbirth or very early on, he had met him in the spirit. So all of a sudden, the whole vista of family and loved ones starts to appear through that very small initial window at the beginning. And I love that when that happens, because it's almost like, you start off with, it's like painting a picture, a tiny little bit of paint and a little bit of connection, and all of a sudden this beautiful vista opens up of family and support and love. Now, it's not always family and support and love. Oftentimes, a lot of healing has to take place. Like, you know, just because somebody has died doesn't mean they don't need healing, or the sitter doesn't need healing. I mean, the healing is always a big part of the work, I find. And so I will stop oftentimes in the middle of a session and say, look, let's just bring the light of heaven, the light of the angels in here, and bring healing for you, or bring healing for this person or that person, you know. And even forgive, a lot of forgiveness comes out in the work too. Like again, in one of my readings yesterday, and it was a good learning for me, because again, it was I had to accept my humility in the situation. I could feel the grief in the sitter. I could feel, this was a different woman now, and I could feel the grief in her heart. I said, I can really feel you're grieving at the moment. And she acknowledged that. And then I was listening to see, well, who's coming in for you? And I could not get them. I couldn't. I couldn't. And I said, well, you know, and so it's so easy then as a medium to start guessing, you know, is it, and that was a real good learning for me, to just be humble, just to be humble. And I said, I can't feel who it is. I can't feel who it is, you know. 95% of the time I do, but in this situation, I couldn't. So I had to just say that. And then that's okay. I said to the person, look, I can't feel who it is. Can you tell me? You know, so she said, well, it's my brother. It's my brother. I said, okay, let's see if I can connect with him then. And, you know, I was able then to connect with him. I was able then to connect to him. Again, it was really, really tiny at the time. The connection was so slim at the beginning, because he was in the room, obviously, but he was very, I'm going to say, diffuse. His energy was very diffuse initially. He wasn't coming in to my link, you know. So, but as soon as she named him, she said, it's my brother that I've lost. As soon as she named him, I got him. I got him. And straight away I said he was a drinker. And you know, just a little bit of information, and then off we went. But you know, and I was able to bring him in more and more and give the evidence. But you know, interestingly enough, what happened was, you know, he had died and he felt terribly guilty. He felt really guilty that it was his fault, that he had made a mistake. You know, he was driving and he had made a mistake, and therefore caused his own death. And he felt guilty because he had left his sister behind and his wife and kids, you know, and he felt really guilty about that. And he was beating himself up with the stick, you know, and very angry about it all. So again, you know, it's not all love and light in the spirit world. Of course it's not. There are so many levels of consciousness. And sometimes people go into what are called the lower realms. And you know, they need a lot of healing to come back up. But for this guy, anyway, you know, their mother had died when they were 3, both of them. And the sister and the brother had basically supported each other their whole lives. They had been each other's rocks emotionally. They had been through so much abuse in their childhood, from one home to the next. God bless them, you know. But the mother had died, and the mother came in. The mother came in, and, you know, she had because she had always been there. She had always been there in their lives, trying to protect them, trying to look after them. But she felt so guilty herself for letting them down, she said, for dying when they were so young and not being there and having to witness all the hurt and pain they had gone through in their early childhood, and abuse and neglect they had gone through in their early childhood. It's amazing they survived it all. Amazing, really. So she came into the room, but she could not see the son. She couldn't see him, even though they're both in the spirit. She couldn't see him because her guilt, her guilt was blocking her completely. So, but once we brought in the light, I love that phrase, the light of heaven. Once we brought in the light of heaven, you know, and lifted the guilt from her, lifted the veil. It was almost like a veil lifted from her eyes, and took the stick off him, you know, too. it was like the two of them were reunited again, mother and son, after 55 years. Mother and son were reunited in the spirit, but she couldn't see him and he couldn't go to her because both of them carried so much guilt. But once we brought the healing into the session, the two of them reconnected, and it was the most incredible feeling in the room, that for the first time they were now together again after such a long time. The healing was enormous. The sitter was really impacted by it all, in such a positive way. And such a learning for me too, because it's like, wow, healing, we need so much healing. Even when people pass, we need healing. We need reconciliation. We need forgiveness. Life goes on. Life goes on. And let's forgive, let's reconnect, let's heal, and just continue doing that work over and over. So a huge amount of learning for me yesterday. I think I did 7 readings. Yesterday's a busy day, very full. And yet at the end of the day, I felt really energized. I'm a little bit tired today, but I feel very positive. I feel super, it's a super gift. I can't believe I actually do this sort of thing. Maybe I'll do a video on how that happened, but I've spent most of my life working in the area of spirituality as opposed to spiritualism, which this belongs to. So it's an incredible gift, and I'm just so glad to be able to help people and continue to learn my craft, continue to learn my craft and develop my craft. So if you're still here at this point and listening, good for you. And any feedback I'm always open to constructive feedback. All right, go well. Bye for now.